So now that we've had over a week to really see what sort of convention bounce Kamala Harris would get, it turns out that she might be the first presidential candidate to not receive a bounce at all in the past 60 years. Let me show you why. First and foremost, let's get down to the gambling aspect, okay? People are putting their livelihoods into what outcome? Well, the way that the media would tell you right now is likely to be a narrative that is going to say that Kamala Harris is the reincarnation of Obama, not just on skin level, but we're talking about odds of winning the election. But right now, it seems like people, when it comes down to the brass tacks, are saying that Trump has a slight edge. Again, this election cannot be any closer than anybody could really fathom. If you look at this, Pennsylvania, for example, is a 51-49 win for Trump. Again, not 2 points that he wins, but 2% odds of him winning it in the first place by one vote. This election could not get any closer, but this convention that took millions of dollars and all the politicians in Democratic America to really put in their, stick their necks out for Kamala Harris, and yet for it to have no positive impact will surprise you, but we'll get into it. First, let's address what more or less could be ascertained as liberals, people like Nate Silver, the hegemons in the election sphere. These people, they even made articles saying, oh, we predict X and Y sort of bounds from the convention. So again, this is a very big missed opportunity. Has Harris lost ground since the convention in the last 8 days? Not really, but did she lose on a huge opportunity? 110%. It's like missing out on your bonus on your job, okay? That's like $8,000 that you really could have used. And so look at this. So getting to the bottom of it, if we look at the presidential conventions on both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat, you'll notice that ever since 1964, you'll notice that there's been an average bounce since the convention of 5 percentage points. If you recall, around the time of the convention in 1988, Michael Dukakis was trouncing George H.W. Bush in the polls by about 17 percentage points. Bush ended up winning in a landslide by all means. And so you would expect somebody to get a 5-point boost. Now, Trump is different because he's running for a third time, so it's not like he's presenting a new thing. So, his boost in 2016 ought to have been big. 2020, not really, you're the incumbent. But now Kamala, again, what is the big surprise? Well, let's look at this. So the closest example of what we're looking at in this election would be the 2001. Okay, so we had Bill Clinton serving 2 terms of a popular administration for the Democrats. You had Al Gore, who was the vice president understudy and was rocking in with a convention boost of about 8 percentage points. Huge. George W. Bush had a convention boost of a similar 8%. But the point being is that, again, Al Gore capitalized on that opportunity. You look at somebody like Kamala. Has she gone up even half of the 8% that Al Gore did? Again, this is the closest analogy I can make here, the closest comparison. She is not even sniffed close to it. And frankly, again, you look at Biden and Trump's 2020 conventions and they were about even. But then again, Biden and Trump were both guys in their 70s, known commodities. The bounce you're going to get from that, from people that are already well known, is not going to be that high. So that makes sense. But even Clinton, who's hateable, obviously most people hate Hillary Clinton that have a heart. She even had a 2-point boost, and she was a known quantity. So think about that. Even Hillary got a 2-point boost, but did Kamala? Let's get into it. All right, so judging off the polling as of the past week since this convention, you'll notice that Harris has a lead of about 1.8. Her lead prior to it was about 1.5. So the bounce, if you can call it one, was 0.3%. This is not cutting it. By any means, Kamala Harris is likely, and this is even liberals, Nate Silver would say this, she needs to win the popular vote by about 3.5 percentage points or more to even win in the first place with the Electoral College. So to be up by less than 2 by RCP standards is not great. And if you look at 538, which I don't believe in because it has too many junk polls in it, you'd even find that they do not have her winning by like 5 or anything necessary to beat Trump. But looking at these polls as of recently, you'll notice that of the ones that were conducted after the convention, Harris is winning by 1 according to the Wall Street Journal. You have Rasmussen with Trump winning by 2. You have Quinnipiac with Harris up by 1. And you have Reuters with kind of like a mixed poll giving the dates that you're looking at, but it has Harris up by 4. So maybe that one's the only one that she could be doing decent in. But generally, most of these polls do not show much of a bounce at all. Another illustration for you guys. You look at early August, before the conventions for either candidate. Again, Harris up by 1. She's up by 1.4, 1.6, 1.7. August 21st, we begin the convention. She's up 1.5. Okay. What is she today? Up 1.8. 0.3%. Again, margin of error in polling, by the way, is up to 4%. So for you to be up by 0.3 is realistically only a tenth of what is like in the wishy-washy of the polls. And so we're really looking at someone who has not done great. Add on the fact that in Georgia, we've recently gotten news that the Secretary of State there actually has gotten rid of RFK off the ballot after obviously RFK endorsed Trump, which is another big deal that shoots the leg of the convention bump by obviously having a third-party national candidate endorse the adversary. But even more than this, we have RFK off the ballot in Georgia, but beyond it, you've got the third-party candidates that are actually pretty far left that will definitely take votes from a person like Harris, people like Jill Stein, people like Cornel West, those figures, they're on the ballot for Georgia. So while, yes, you can have an election here where obviously Trump is still losing, just imagine having a few more candidates ankle biting the Democrat. It's really bad. Here's another point, by the way. You'll notice this. When you put in all the candidates, even the far left ones, Harris increases her lead, but obviously you need a better, understanding to know why these are junk polls. But let's look at the part that actually matters. With Kennedy out the way, the plurality of these voters, if not the outright majority, will go to vote for Trump, obviously. So you take those Kennedy people out. Trump is netting, let's say, anywhere from 0.3 to 0.8 percentage points, which is not great, but is also about equal or better than the convention bump, by the way, that Harris was supposed to be having. So much for a honeymoon, by the way. I think it's over by now. And if you've seen that interview, I covered it. Jeez Louise, man. Oh my God. But okay, you look at this. Stein, the candidate, Green Party, she gets 1% of the popular vote. So imagine Harris getting a vote that would otherwise be 90% Democrat going to Jill Stein. That's horrible. Cornel West, again, basically melanated Bernie Sanders for the lack of I know about him. That's all that I know. So that's 0.8% of the vote. Chase Oliver, I think is his name, libertarian nominee. He is a liberal, social libertarian. I don't know if he's gay, but you know what I mean? Definitely not the type to be on the conservative end. So he's taking more votes from Kamala, if I had to guess. And so you really do have a consortium of about 2.5% of the popular vote that otherwise would have went to Harris or sat out that are going into these third-party candidates, which is horrible for Kamala. Here's another aspect, right? So you can see that Kamala Harris is somebody who has a negative approval rating of negative 1.7. Now, this is not horrible, and by any means, it's actually better than she's ever been. But while this might be a sterling representation of what is otherwise a very hateable person, just mathematically looking at it, you'll understand that it exists in a context much like Kamala would say herself, where you have someone in her that has been receiving very good positive coverage for about 40 days. In fact, she had this convention, everybody's lauding her. Her speech objectively was very mid. I mean, aside from the 100 thank yous at the beginning as if she were drunk, I mean, it's a disaster, folks. But I mean, to a greater point, again, she's getting all the underdogs in the swing, and she's still not even underwater. She's not above water in the polls when it comes to being likable. Now, yes, Trump does have a negative approval rating that is even worse than Harris. In fact, it's closer to 10 versus the Harris 2. But also keep in mind that Trump's disfavorability in 2020 was a little worse than it is now, but also Biden's was positive 6. And so that was really a gulf of about negative 15 between those two candidates in the last election, and Trump almost won. Kamala is only up by 6, if that makes sense. So the lead in hateability is cut by more than half in this election versus the last one. But you're going to tell me that Kamala is going to win. But add on to that in 2016, you had Trump, who also wasn't really liked, but Hillary was super hated, and Trump ended up being the winner of that election. So what is Kamala now? A hateable woman candidate against Trump, who is also not popular? Who wins? Well, Trump already did 8 years ago. We'll see. Another horrible kill shot for the Harris campaign. We've actually have a tabulation of the polling succinctly of the changes in the records in the past week. You'll notice, according to Nate Silver, again, a liberal partisan, you'll notice that in terms of national polling, you'll notice that, yes, Harris and the Democrats generally have done 3.2 percentage points better in the polls than Biden was as of the last 30 days. But again, that's considering that there was a shift between, again, Kamala and Biden. Now, that honeymoon period was a blip in time. You look at a more recent study, and obviously that convention was 8 or 9 days ago at this point. You'll notice that the changes in the last week have been an average of a 0.9 Republican increase across the entire country. Crazy, right? So again, you put in millions of dollars, have all these advocates and surrogates on your behalf, senators, congressmen, governors, saying Kamala's great, whatever. You have your own 40-minute speech. You have your opportunity. Not only do you miss the shot and fumble that opportunity, but you also apparently have shot yourself in the foot, Kamala, when it comes down to this recent polling. Now, this interview might make it even worse. This interview that has been so hyped up that perhaps it was a problem to avoid the media in the first place, but maybe, I don't know. But I mean, come on. Now, you look at this. Again, Trump goes up a percentage even though the convention happened, which only shows that either the convention did not help at all or it actually hurt. And that actually RFK is doing his job of the endorsement is actually providing more than a placebo to the Trump campaign. Look at that. Now, to even add more to my case, even though I've got the guy indicted and, you know, the theoretical argument in here is dead and buried. But listen, Nate Silver, again, he's already proving my point that Trump has gone up in the past week instead of Harris, which is ironic. But look at this. Biden. In 2020, again, Nate Silver had this whole shebang and, you know, a lot of money put into infrastructure to predict the 2020 election. You look at this, you know, the day before the election, 4 years ago, look at this. Trump only has a 10% odds of beating Biden. Well, how did that freaking turn out, bud? Okay, how did that turn out? Trump barely lost. And, you know, plus all the corona stuff and you know what happened. So, I mean, for him to give Trump a 10% odds in 2020 was asinine, just completely out of line with logic. And don't even get me started in how wrong he and the vast majority of people were when it came to the 2016 election. Okay. And also, believe it or not, but, you know, obviously, a reasonable, smart person could have said, okay, you know, 2020, the day before the election, you know, Biden probably has like a 60 something percent odds of winning. And I could concede that, even though I was more 55-45 Trump. But you'll notice that he is 89-10. What? It's insane. Not to dweeb out too much, but you'll notice that the circles here are noting the possibilities in the Electoral College. So, for example, you'll notice that there's more balls on the side of Biden winning Texas than in Florida than there is for Trump to win the election by flipping Minnesota, for example. So, again, the guy's math was completely broken, and you can kind of see what I mean. Let's just add on more, okay? Like the video if you like me to beat the dead horse, because, again, I just am a sadistic person. Look at this. Joe Biden, again, this is his forecast. 53.4 to Trump's 45.4. So he had Trump losing the popular vote by -8. Again, losing the vote 8% to Biden. Trump ended up losing it by like 4.5. So again, he was off by 3.5%. So if his average is off by 3.5, last election, God forbid it's off 3.5 today, and Trump's actually winning the popular vote. And by the way, if Trump wins the popular vote, there's virtually no way he loses. In fact, he'd win by a ton at that point. So to be off by 3.5 in the popular vote in a 1v1 election is a horrible practice, by the way. Just a complete pathetic excuse of a prediction this was. So now as an epilogue, let's add in what swing voters, according to the BBC, came away with after watching that Kamala Harris interview. I would have added this had I seen it yesterday, but look at this. So we have an Indian guy, 29 years old, undecided voter in Pennsylvania. Let's look at this. He backed Democrats in the past 2 elections, but remains undecided. This is huge. Imagine if you voted for Trump twice and you're still undecided. It's a very niche person, but it's also somebody who's very unlikely to vote Republican, and yet he's still in the middle. Just imagine how bad of a candidate you would have to have for Kamala to really be in this losing position now. Now imagine this. First paragraph, Harris can speak coherently, which I argue, but which is just an upgrade from the prior 2 candidates, both Trump and Biden. I think she's relatively eloquent in the way that she talks, but in terms of policies, this was the first time I think I've actually heard some elements of a substantive policy from her. The interview didn't do a whole lot to assuage my concerns, however. What she'd actually want to do and whatever she was going to do effectively to implement it. You've been VP for a few years. Why haven't you attempted these things before? Again, this is the basic prognosis. These are people that don't really follow politics. They watch the interview because they're normal Americans that are interested. And guess what? They say, okay, I mean, yes, you're better than Biden, sure. But what are the policies? And how could you implement them? And if so, then why the hell haven't you done this with Biden in the past 4 years? Common sense questions, common sense. Again, this is not Republican talking points. This is not Kellyanne Conway printing up something for you to read on Fox. This is just normal IT guy, Indian tech support or whatever he is. Okay. Interesting. Another huge indication of Kamala doing bad here. I think that the interview was a little too coddled. I would like to see her put under some pressure, and I don't think she'd do too well in the past as the VP in those conditions. So think about it. You don't approve of her as VP thus far, as she's done nothing really. And beyond this, You think that the interview was coddled despite being a undecided voter that has voted for Biden and Clinton. You see how bad this is for Kamala? Another person, Jeremy Peterson, 26, Utah. Now, he's from Utah, so who honestly cares what he thinks? But I do like one thing he said here. He's a teacher who voted for the Green Party last election, but he feels Harris's message lacked conviction. So again, Harris is not only somebody who is tarred and feathered, rightfully so, as being on the socialist end of the Democrat spectrum, but you have people that are actual socialists like this guy, and they're saying, well, we honestly, like, yes, you're far left, but you're not far left enough, or we don't actually believe what you're saying. And so not only is she losing people from the common sense middle, but also the far left. It's a difficult position she's boxed herself into, all the more delicious for me to watch it happen. Now, this is also a key diamond in the rough here. This guy says, I didn't hear enough to persuade me yet, because it feels like on one hand, she's saying we'll be different to Biden, but on the other hand, it's like we're also going to be the same with a new face, which is the bottom line here. Joe Biden has a negative disapproval rating of like negative 15 percentage points. So if you're telling me, oh, it's Biden, but he doesn't have dementia and he's diverse, most people are going to say, okay, but the taxes still suck. Inflation still sucks. Ukraine war is bad. Israel stuff is crazy. And so all this like war and all these negative attributes of the Biden administration thus far are not going to be good for anybody who's running as a new face of it. And so for someone to take away that is horrible for Kamala. Okay, we have Edward Green, 22 years old, New Hampshire, undecided voter. Again, seems like a pretty nice guy, could not even hurt a house fly, right? Okay, so let's see what his critique is of Kamala. All right, so with the interview, I wasn't particularly impressed. To be honest, I don't think the interview revealed much. I also understand that's sort of politics, and that's got to be true of any given campaign. And the more specific they get, the easier it is to campaign against them. So you see, he's even knowing that she's not getting in the particulars of the policy. Important to note. Now, undecided voter says, I appreciate Harris when she's talking specifically about her planned measures for economic reform and this opportunity economy she's talking about, but I don't think it was particularly compelling or the questions were particularly challenging. Again, two of these undecided voters saying, hey, this was a coddled interview on CNN. They're not saying it with those words, but you can get that's what they actually picked up at a subconscious level. Keep in mind, she went on CNN with Dana Bash. It's like if Trump did his first interview after 40 days with Sean Hannity on Fox News. To say it isn't biased is just ridiculous. And you could also hold the opinion of like, actually, Sean Hannity is biased, but he's probably like biased in the right way because he's conservative. And okay, but let's concede that the person is biased. Dana Bash is definitely not voting for Trump. Let's get real. So come on. But, all right, look at this. I'm not sure anything in the interview would convince me to vote for Harris Walz. One of the big reasons why people were excited for Harris taking over was that Biden was so bad in live, unscripted moments. And it was also that she was young and that she might infuse energy into the campaign. But because of the lack of live interviews and answering questions so far, I still have concerns about her competency. Keyword competency, right? It's not so much, oh, she's DEI or whatever. It's competency. That's the underlying thing. You cannot do interviews. You can't do anything as vice president while Biden's over here out for lunch. I mean, competency is the name of the game. All right, so in summation, let's do the final presidential election prediction as of right now. As we can see, I've sat on my hands for over a week just waiting to see the polls after this convention. The bounce didn't happen. Imagine a jumping castle that's deflated. I mean, it's not sinking you into the ground, but it's not bouncing you up either, and you need the bounce. Again, Kamala needs to be beating Trump in these like liberal polls by like several points for me to think that she's going to win, okay? You need to win by more than what Biden did to have a good chance of locking down the election. She has done the absolute opposite. This interview might be the next piece of the unraveling of the Democratic honeymoon in the summer of 2024. Let's get down to it, okay? So we have 7 swing states. As of right now, I'm pretty confident Trump will lock down North Carolina. I'm pretty confident he will lock down Arizona. I think he'll keep Nevada as obviously a really good state for him, given the no tax on tips. Again, Kamala Harris has been stealing a lot of the ideas, whether it be the tax credit from J.D. Vance, the Trump border wall somehow, the tax on tips from Trump, namely, again, the Social Security taxes on or whatever, that sort of thing. I'm pretty sure she stole that too. So, I mean, the plagiarism is something you'd get locked up for in school academically. You'd be in a lot of trouble and you're getting pressed. I think the voter will also notice this and repudiate her in the ballots come November. But until then, let's just predict this election. So right now we also have Georgia, which I think will go to Trump. She's recently been campaigning there, but I feel like her rallies proportionately do much less than do the Trump ones. Obviously, I mean, look at the crowds. I was at the Trump rally in the Desert Diamond Casino or Arena, sorry, and Marvelous. He had about another 5,000 beyond what Kamala Harris and Walz got. Very cool stuff. Anyway, so we're gonna get Wisconsin. That's probably red too. That's my prediction. Pennsylvania will go red, and if it doesn't, I'm giving up on the state. Frankly, like, come on. Amish people, get out and vote. And Michigan is really torn right now. Michigan could totally go narrowly for Harris, so we're going to leave it blue for now. So keep in mind that this is 297 electoral votes to Harris is 241. This is a handsome victory. This is assuming that Harris wins the popular vote by maybe half of a percentile or something like that. You know, it's not a great look for Kamala. Trump, on the other hand, again, would win like in 2016, give or take a state or two, and he would have lost the popular vote again. But so much talk for the honeymoon. I'm pretty sure it's over. You got to pack your bags and leave and get to the airport, baby, because that honeymoon is donezo. Like the video if you haven't liked it, and subscribe if you haven't yet. See y'all in the next one. Adios.